Let's face it, at this point in my career, I don't have a wide body of work for people to be familiar with. Therefore, it doesn't strike me as particularly strange that their first expectation or opinion of me would be based upon what they do know, which is that I'm Bruce Lee's son.
When Brandon Lee began to walk, his father, Bruce Lee, began training him in martial arts. His family would live either in Hong Kong or the United States based on his father's current project. As a boy, he would visit his father's film sets, and the idea of being an actor budded in his mind early. Then at age 8, Bruce Lee died, and his family returned to live in California. His father's death loomed like a shadow over everything Lee did. He would continue to train in martial arts with the help of Dan Inosanto, Richard Bastillo, and Jeff Imada, but in such places, pictures of Bruce Lee were everywhere. His father was so famous in martial arts circles that it was very uncomfortable for him. In time, Brandon would steer away from martial arts in favor of soccer, but during his high school years, he would often have difficulty at school and would inevitably be expelled for misbehaving in 1983. Lee would eventually get his diploma and enrolled in the Lee Strasberg Actors Studio and continued his pursuit of acting at Emerson College in Boston. Within 2 years, Lee got a part on a CBS movie for television called Kung Fu the Movie, which continued the further adventures of Kane, played by David Carradine. Lee would play his long-lost son, and what is ironic about this was that the character of Kane was based on Bruce Lee, and he was initially the person planned to play that part, but that did not happen. While working on Kung Fu, Brandon was reunited with his old buddy Jeff Imada, who he trained martial arts with when he was younger. Imada was the stunt coordinator for the show. Since Lee was close to Imada, he would often confide with his friend about doing the show. He wasn't too thrilled about doing the martial arts stuff. It was just sort of a hard thing to, imagine. You're the son of Bruce Lee. Everybody's gonna be looking at you under a magnifying glass and seeing if you're good or whatever. And he just didn't want to be in the shadow of his dad. What Brandon feared occurred in the early days of his acting career. Studios wanted to use his relation to his father to cash in on that basis, or expect that he only play a character using martial arts. At first, Brandon did what he had to get into the door, and that was one of the reasons he did the 1987 Kung Fu: The Next Generation television film, to get further in that door. During the late 1980s, Lee evolved in many ways. He started having a passion for acting, and he got back into martial arts very seriously, even getting certified as a Thai kickboxer. He also had mellowed quite a bit. Gone was the frustrated and sullen teen. He was now very down to earth and wasn't a party animal that took his celebrity for granted. On the weekends, he would work out often with his buddy Jeff Imada. Lee had many opportunities to cash in on being a martial artist or the son of his father, and no better example would be his opportunity to play his father in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. In April 1991, while he was filming his first big break role in Showdown in Little Tokyo, Lee passed on the role, not only because he didn't want to play his father, but also portraying the romance of his parents was a bit awkward for him to imagine. Jason Scott Lee would take the role, but was nervous and went to Brandon for advice. He said, "I wouldn't survive in this part if I treated his father like a god." He said his father was, after all, a man who had a profound destiny, but he was not a god. He was a man who had a temper, a lot of anger, and found mediocrity offensive. Sometimes he was rather merciless. When Lee finished his big breakout film alongside Dolph Lundgren, Showdown in Little Tokyo, he played Johnny Murata, a smooth-talking, sharp-dressing California cop. The film didn't do great financially, and a lot of critics bashed the movie, but it became a cult classic after the death of Brandon Lee. Lee's next film would be Rapid Fire, and once again, his buddy Jeff Imada would team up with him as stunt coordinator. And for this role, Lee played many different ranges, from grief over the death of his father, sarcasm, aggressive, and humorous. It was this role that would get the attention of those casting The Crow. They could clearly see Brandon could portray action, but that he had adaptive acting chops. During the fall of 1992, Brandon read the script, then the comic, and signed for a 3-picture deal for the lead role of Eric in The Crow. And the first thing Brandon did when he signed was get his buddy Jeff Imada into the production as stunt coordinator. Soon after, Brandon began conferring with the team about the script and action scenes. With an actor attached, a negative pickup deal was approved through Paramount for about $14 million, which meant Paramount would pay $14 million for the finished film when delivered. The hiring began, and some, like costume designer Ariana Phillips, were recommendations from Brandon Lee. Ariana had just been to a cocktail party where Brandon announced that he and his girlfriend Eliza Hutton were getting engaged. And during the gathering, Brandon came up to her, told her about the movie, and then said, "You've got to do the costumes. You have to do the costumes. You're perfect for it. It's really rock and roll." Casting was fairly quick, and the team needed people who were not huge stars because they didn't have a lot of money to waste. In most cases, those cast made about $1,500 a week, which was scale for film actors at the time. There were some names that were recognizable, like Ernie Hudson, who everyone knew, of course, from Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2.
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
Recently, Hudson had done a lot of memorable films within the last 3 years, like Leviathan.
I realize you must have gone through hell.
Gone? Bitch, we still here!
A comedy vehicle starring Pat Morita and Jay Leno called Collision Course, the thriller Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and currently he was involved in the production of Sugar Hill with Wesley Snipes. And a very cool film called No Escape, where he played Hawkins, a major character that kept Ray Liotta in check. I recommend seeing No Escape, and who knows, there's probably a very good chance it might become a hidden gem down the road. He would also appear in The Cowboy Way with Kiefer Sutherland, and Airheads with Brendan Fraser, Steve Buscemi, and Adam Sandler taking over a radio station. All 4 films I just mentioned would release alongside The Crow in 1994 to give you an idea of just how busy Ernie was. For top dollar, Michael Wincott was a perfect pick. His voice is just too cool for school. Hey, it's an 80s phrase. I'm hip. Anyways, Wincott was recently in The Doors, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and The Three Musketeers. Tony Todd was another awesome choice, as he was fairly known for Candyman while they were getting the movie together. Todd had been in a few films that made him recognizable, like Platoon, Colors, Lean on Me, and of course Night of the Living Dead. But when Candyman came out on October 1992, he was gaining serious cred. Of course, if you were a Star Trek fan, you loved Todd because he played Worf's brother Kern in Star Trek The Next Generation and later Deep Space Nine.
We cannot win. We must withdraw. Keep your place.
Another very recognizable casting pick was David Patrick Kelly as T-Bird. Kelly was in a lot of recognizable films, especially his role in The Warriors. Most of his films were widely known, like Dreamscape, 48 Hours, Wild at Heart, and The Psycho Stalker Sam in Adventures of Ford Fairlane, and the grimy Sully in Commando.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.
Filming began on February 1993 at sound stages owned by Corolco Pictures in Wilmington, North Carolina. Workdays were 14 to 18 hours, and the film projected to last 51 days with a projected budget of $15.1 million. Before the first shot began, the crew prepared the set in a rush, and a carpenter named Jim Martisius was using a cherry-picking cage. He backed in a power line and caught on fire quickly. His winter clothes went ablaze, and the crew immediately got him down, but because the shoot was so rushed, there was no medic available. A medic from the bordering set, which was filming Matlock episodes, rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Jim would lose his ears and suffer second and third degree burns on 80% of his body. The ironic thing was that just before this incident, there was concern that power lines would be hard to see during the night. Still, things went forward, and before the crew could work on indoor sets, they had to get finished with scenes on the back lot, and this would be the first day of filming. Now remember, it was February, and it was still winter. Not to mention, the scenes were shot mostly at night, because the film's tone was bleak and dark, making it colder. It would be around 15 degrees, and there was also a wind chill. And to put this into perspective, when they tried to have a trained bird fly on the set one night, it could not keep flight because its wings began to freeze. Brandon was just a machine, though. He dove into the part and was already undergoing a strict diet and worked out constantly. He even took guitar lessons because if he played a member of a band, he should know how to play the instrument his character would use. Brandon even went so far to take an ice bath to feel how limbs would move when the body was freezing cold, to get used to playing a dead person. This dedication would translate to his focus on the backlot as well. Brandon would perform with little clothes on, and everyone around him wore thick winter clothes. He's like barefoot, naked, except for his pants, and dripping wet, freezing cold in the middle of the night, and never complained once, not once. To add to this was the rain and steam, some real and most of it made through special effects department. It was noted the steam and rain would sometimes ice up, and the crew just couldn't believe the endurance of Brandon to get through it constantly. However, it needs to be mentioned that even the littlest performer had grueling hours on the set.
They also didn't really recognize a lot the child labor laws. I was doing 12 and 16-hour shifts, and I was not supposed to do more than 9 hours, including school.
Sometimes her guardians would have to intervene to get her off the set, and one example is when she was asked to keep going one night. "I'm really tired. I worked 12 hours. I'd like to go home." And he said, "Well, can we just do this one last scene? We'll just do this one last scene. You'll be done." And I said, "Yeah, but one last scene means a lot of takes, and I'm tired. I want to go home." And he said, "Oh, come on, just stick it out. It'll only be an hour. I'll get you out of here in an hour." And my aunt walked up and said, "No, she's going home now. She worked 12 hours. She's done." This may sound like the set was a slave-driving, thoughtless environment, but that's so very far from the truth. The crew believed in what they were doing and were committed, and Alex Proyas was supported and appreciated by most on the set. Alex was doing the best he could to try and direct the job and keep everybody happy, the production and the studio and everybody else. But as far as directing, Alex is right there, and he and Brandon were very close. But that did not mean Hudson did not have a voice. When he first arrived to the set, a week or so into the shoot, he noticed there were no heaters for anyone and said something about how uncomfortable it was for the actors and crew. The next day, heaters would appear on the set. The real problem was the pressure on Alex from the money men. Proyas was also prone to constantly changing things on the set suddenly, and we will go into this in great detail later in this video. However, these changes would cause friction between him and Jeff Most, as Most wanted the film to be like the original vision of the movie. According to executive producer Robert Rosen, there was a period of time about midway through the picture where Alex and Jeff weren't hitting it off, and Alex felt that he was being interfered with. Whatever Alex felt. I don't know, but that wasn't working. Jeff Most, the producer who started the entire process of making The Crow from the very start, was now barred from the set of the film by executive producer Bob Rosen. So instead of working on the set or fighting about it, he focused on the film's music and soundtrack, while actors and crew would often visit him to talk about the production. Now, there were legitimate attempts to keep everything safe on the set. And yet, at the same time, there was a growing unease that the set was not safe by many on the crew. And it's hard to sift through who is right and wrong because there are many opinions through the cast and crew. Another thing you need to think of is that Jeff Imada constantly looked out for his best friend Brandon's safety. One thing is for sure, though, the set of the crew needed to be safer. One thing that did not help the safety was that Brandon came off as invincible because he struggled through the first day of shooting in freezing conditions with no clothes. At times, even Brandon refused safety for the sake of getting shots believable. For instance, one time, he was to be filmed 5 stories up walking on the edge of a building, and Brandon was insistent that no safety mats needed to be placed below. Brandon said, "Oh no, I don't need mats. I don't need anything down below. You should have seen the shot. It was insane. It was sheer stupidity. Nobody looked after his safety." To further cause more safety issues was the demands to keep the budget in line and to speed up, and this would cause a fatal mistake. One night, while shooting a scene, they needed some dummy bullets for a scene where the thugs act like they are swallowing bullets. Due to time constraints, Detective Brian Pettis, who would later investigate events on this film, stated this for the record. "They were pushing for time. They couldn't stall the scene. They didn't want to spend the money on bullets because they were running behind on the bullets. And Bruce Merlin was going to be a trooper and say, I can save this money and I can save us time. Let's just make them." The bullets were made in the back of an armorer's truck where the guns were stored. And Daniel Kuttner, who was the property master of the set, stated, "You know, I'm real uneasy about this whole thing." It was this moment that would lead to Brandon Lee's death, and we will go into the logistics of these bullets and this incident later. Stuff like this would continue, and the faster they were pushed by the money people, the more reckless and demanding the shoot became. The crew even joked about guns being waterlogged, and some in the crew were not amused by that mentality. They tried to unjam it by simply opening and closing it and pulling the trigger. I went up to the first AD and I said, "Do you know what? These guys don't know jack shit about weapons. I've been around them since I was 6 years old. I'm not going to be on set." True to her word, Michelle left the set. During the late afternoon of March 30th, 1993, the film was about 8 days over schedule with 50 days into the shoot. Brandon worked out at Wilmington Fitness today, and he talked about getting married, and then he went to his trailer where he called his mother. Meanwhile, at the Loft set, Alex Proyas was going back and forth over the death of Shelley and Eric in the flashback scene. The scene had changed so many times that it was hard to keep up, and just recently, Sophia Shinas was told she would be shot by the gang, and she was given armor to protect her body for the scene. Lance Anderson, who was part of the makeup effects, said Eric was to be stabbed and a shoulder harness was made for this scene, to be worn by Lee. Then the gang would shoot him after that. When Lance arrived on the set with the harness and fake knife, he took it straight to the director. I showed it to Alex and I said, "I gotta get this on him for the scene." And he said, No, we've changed it. He's getting shot." Proyas wanted Eric to walk in the apartment with a bag of groceries and be shot while Brandon Lee would activate a squib in the grocery bag, making it look like it exploded from the bullet. Then the discussion turned to who would shoot Eric Draven, as it was a spur-of-the-moment situation. At first, Proyas picked Lawrence Mason, and Mason wasn't having it. He'd wanted me to shoot him, and I was like, "I'm the knife guy. I can't shoot him." I was just pissed off because I'm the knife guy. Why am I all of a sudden gonna use a gun? Just doesn't make any sense. I stood by that. So Michael Massey was picked as the shooter, and Lawrence Mason believes that decision was made because Massey was standing next to him. Meanwhile, at another stage, 13-year-old Rochelle Davis was waiting on a church set where she would be dangling 30 feet above the ground, and they could not find her safety harness. crazily, an adult actually asked this young 13-year-old girl, "Will it be all right if you go up there and just hang on to the thing and we'll try to put something underneath you in case you fall? Or somebody will wait underneath you to make sure you don't fall. And if you do, they'll try to catch you." And I was kind of like, I don't think I want to get up on that building without a harness. It was then Rochelle's mother spoke up. "No, you're not putting my daughter up there without a cable holding her. That's too dangerous. It's 30 feet up there. It's raining. How do you think she's going to be able to hold on for a full scene without, falling?" So Jeff Amata was called to this set, and Rochelle Davis was sent to her trailer, where she listened to music and read a magazine. They asked Jeff about the situation with Davis's shot, and he stated to the other unit that it was clearly unsafe to film her without a harness, and therefore they would have to wait, and then he returned to the loft set. Meanwhile, Brandon Lee went to his makeup trailer where Sophia Shinos was, and the two would get touch-ups. According to Sophia, the wardrobe supervisor showed up and stated that Alex Proyas changed his mind about their death scene during the flashback. Alex had decided, instead of the goons killing Shelley with a gun, they would shoot Eric Draven. So he wanted Sophia to relinquish the armor vest that was given to her so that it could be given to Brandon instead. Brandon replied that he didn't want to put on the vest. He didn't want it to be seen in the shot. The wardrobe supervisor showed him it wouldn't be, but Brandon said, "I'm not putting it on. If it's my time to go, it's my time to go." And he went ahead and did the scene without the armament vest on. Sophia questioned Brandon about his decision, as she was nervous and she was a new actress. She asked Lee if he was worried. "No, I'm not." I said, "Aren't you paranoid?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because if it's my time, it's my time." And that's a direct quote. Now, there were many on the set, including Jeff Amata, who insisted an armor-proof vest was not needed because the only thing Brandon would have to deal with was a squib, which was pointed away from him in a bag. The gun was never supposed to be pointed at him, but as most of you know, that would not be the case. And before we wrap up this video, there are many books that you can check out about the Crow movie, but one that I wanted to single out was The Crow, the story behind the film, which was written by Bridget Baiss. And I highly recommend this book, as it's very extensive with lots of interviews. If you're an avid moviegoer and love The Crow, this is a great book to check out. I highly recommend it. And with that said, our next video will largely focus on that fateful day. And once again, we will end our video with Brandon Lee.
It's a wonderful role, and it really is a role that you have to take risks with, and it gives you a wonderful opportunity to take those risks and stretch, because you tell me how somebody who comes back from the dead is going to behave, you know?
We hope to see you in our next video. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, and so does sharing. Thanks for watching.